everybody from? You, sir, on the end. Where are you from?
Cerrito, California.
Whoa! Oh my goodness. How about you folks?
Pennsylvania.
Nice part of the world.
I'm from my mother.
Butterdum. Shaky Green, Grocers, 1964. Hey, ho, I got a million of them.
Yeah. Flew in from Florida for the cool weather.
Huh? The cool weather, yeah.
It's 25 degrees cooler here, so.
That's true, that's true. I was in New Orleans a few years ago for a reenactment, and even in the winter. You do? I was at Chalmette Battlefield. That's a cool place. You know, I remember this guy comes in, he's got a cell phone, he's wearing a suit, and he says to me, "Does something important happen here?" I said, "Yeah, kinda, sorta." And he said, "Well, I got 5 minutes. Tell me everything I need to know in 5 minutes." Alrighty then. So I gave him the 5-minute version. And sometimes the 5-minute version is best, but the talk today is advertised as being about the half an hour. Now, what does that mean we're going to do? In this talk, it's called Is it time to start yet? I still got 2 minutes. We might have folks who, we got to stick to the official line, but the talk does take about 30 minutes. Goodness. You do see all kinds of stuff here. We do get all sorts of important dignitaries coming here, and we even had Mr. Mel Gibson one time. He was here just after we made The Patriot. Now, as a former Revolutionary War reenactor, I can tell you that movie takes a lot of liberties with history. And Mel Gibson was here one day with his family and his entire retinue. These guys with sunglasses, and they got things in their ears, and they're all kind of talking to each other into their lapels. He comes in, and we had a bunch of reenactors here who were portraying French army of the American Revolution. They're wearing white uniforms, and they've got the curly mustaches, and one of them was our park volunteer Mike Ryan, who's since moved on. Mike Ryan was dressed, he was the dean of students at Boston College, very Catholic institution, so he was dressed as a French priest. He's got the cassock, he's got the beret, he's got the sandals, he's got the beads and the cross and everything. And this guy was a Silver Star recipient. He was an Army Ranger captain in Vietnam. This guy was a badass with a capital B. He goes up to Mel Gibson and says, "I don't like what you do to the Patriot. You did this a bit." And Mel just kind of goes, So finally says, "Father," not sir, but father, padre, stop. I made The Patriot, and they paid me $25 million. With that $25 million, I'm about to make a movie called The Passion of the Christ. Any questions? And Mike was someone who always got the last word. That day he was like, and we all just stood here and just kind of went. So you never know what's going to happen here. It's a wonderful place. And you know what? I think I am. C'est l'heure de commencer maintenant. Hello. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I'm Park Ranger Roger Fuller. I work here at this wonderful national park. Wow. Where the biggest event of the past 500 years took place. Right where we're sitting, standing, whatever, right there. That event was people saying not only no, but heck no to kings, queens, czars, dictators, telling them that they're going to be ruled. Now the operative thing is going to be a successful republic. Have there been republics before? Yes, there had been, but none as successful, long-lasting, or as influential as the United States of America, where the governed govern with the consent of the governed. Or we unelect them, or we don't want to get into that. Remember, this was the American Revolution. It starts here. There have been shooting a few hours before in Lexington, but it's still not clear to this day what actually happened there. When historians talk about the scene in Lexington, they put it in the passive voice. Shots were fired, men were killed. They don't actually say who fired first or what happened. All we know is that by the time they were done, the British had killed 8 colonists and wounded at least a dozen more. And they had been told, don't harm private persons, don't harm private property, only destroy military things that can be used against you in a war. This is why the British Army, the People's Army, the people who live here, this is their army, by the way, this is why the British Army are here. This is the most rebellious of the 13 colonies. Belonging to whom? King George III. Your average person here, even if he was a Minuteman, believed the sky is blue, the grass is green, King George III is our sovereign, I swore an oath to defend him as part of the militia. If only the king knew what was being done in his name in this, our beloved land. Well, people have been living here for 150 years by 1775, and well, pert near, in this area. And they developed their own forms of government, their own habits, their own culture, but they still see themselves as English, to the point where they're trying to tell the British government, we're the same as you back home in England. We should have the same rights, the same privileges. We should be the same as you. The British government's like, no, you're a colony. The 13 colonies are here to make life better for the mother country. It's all part of an empire. The empire, the people out in the empire produce goods, produce raw materials, produce foodstuffs, send them back to the mother country. The mother country's merchants send them to all over the world themselves. You don't conduct your own economies, your own markets here in America to sell to France, Spain, and all the other people that we used to fight with and now we're trading with. And the colonists are like, yeah, but we've been doing that. And the British say, you can't do that. So this most rebellious of the 13 colonies, Massachusetts, is now under a military government. Parliament has decreed all these various laws. They've rescinded most of the laws, trying to keep people happy because it's led to protests, riots, boycotts of British goods, shootings of people. The Boston Massacre. Wow, a bunch of community activists with a community organizer kind of going behind them saying, shoot, shoot, shoot. British soldiers frightened, don't know what's going on. I mean, what's a soldier designed to do? You know, break the enemy's things and kill the bad guys. That's what their job is. Unfortunately, the bad guys turn out to be their own people. So by 1775, there's a tremendous amount of ill feeling, and I am using understatement when I say that, ill feeling between the people of Massachusetts especially and the government of Great Britain. There are people in Great Britain who are sort of sympathetic to this, and the colonists are trying to appeal to them by saying, look, we will take all of our compulsory town militia. What does it mean when I say compulsory?
Mandatory.
Yeah, mandatory. You have to be in the militia. It's not like the National Guard of today, which is a voluntary organization. The militia back then, if you're a male over the age of 16, you must, you will, you have to turn out by law with a gun provided for you by your family or sold to you by the colony. You pay it off on the installment plan. There's interest if you don't pay it off on time. Kind of like a car loan or more like a student loan, you think about it. Yeah. And people took their self-defense here very, very seriously. They've been using the militias against the local natives from far away, against the French, the Spanish. Are these men that live here, are they all war veterans? Are they all, to use that lovely term, Indian fighters? No, that's the Mel Gibson version. The reality is most people here are farmers if they had served in previous wars, for the most part, because they had to maintain their farms, they only turned out for militia duty to guard things. Guarding warehouses, guarding docks, guarding ports, guarding prisoners occasionally in previous wars. Well, we've got a lot of national myths which have come down to us about what these people are actually like. The British Army, the best army in the world. No, they're not. British Army's got 28,000 redcoats. That's it. That's all they've got. The Royal Navy's the most powerful navy in the world. No, most of it's sitting, rotting in port. They've gotten rid of most of the sailors. Why? It's peacetime. Armies are too expensive. What do most governments do with their military in peacetime? They pretty much, try to minimize the budgets as much as possible. Britain is no exception. They're broke. Remember those taxes they wanted us to pay? The British really needed that money bad. They were bankrupt. They really were. So the British Army is very, very small. The militia haven't seen a war in the better part of 20 years. Both sides in 1775, I think they're not really ready for war, but the colonists are trying to win the hearts and minds of people back home in England by calling their militias, which they gathered together in an army of observation, meaning we will shadow the regular army every time it leaves Boston, and if it leaves Boston in more than 500 in number, we know it is a design to come out to Concord our big supply base, or maybe to Worcester, further west, to destroy colonial arms supplies in an effort to make it so that the colonists cannot wage war against the British Army. Think about it. Imagine, if you will, the militias have been specifically forbidden from appearing. They're forbidden from training. They're forbidden from doing any kind of duty unless the royal governor, General Thomas Gage, gives them the order to do so. The people around here have been forbidden from voting in their local elections because General Thomas Gage has said no elections until you guys behave, pay for the lost tea, things like that from the Boston Tea Party, etc. Various people who've been charged with certain crimes are sent back to London via Admiralty ships, Royal Navy ships, and not put in front of a jury of their own peers. They're taken far away. The rights which you and I take for granted nowadays in America, they pretty much had back then as well. They're all being taken away. Stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool, as somebody would later say. And the people here are very upset about it. So this army of observation is their defense should the British try and do something. And they have done that April 18th, April 19th, 1775. April 19th, after the British, 700 strong, march out from Concord. Their mission is to Concord, and they marched out from Lexington, where nothing was supposed to happen but did anyway. Their mission is get to Concord, go to all these places where we think all these military things are, destroy them, make it so the colonists cannot have the means to challenge us in a war. Force them to either, number one, behave, or number two, we'll come to the peace table and figure something out. The British are terrified of a civil war. Remember, they had their own civil war about 100 years before. It ended up with Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector, the dictator of Great Britain, the enemy of the Irish. Oh my Lord. They'd had their own revolutions, which got so bad they beheaded King Charles. The British are terrified of something like that happening again and coming from America. George III, the sovereign, says if we lose America, we eventually will lose the empire. My wife's from Scotland. She's like, that George III, he wasn't stupid. Where's the British Empire today? Others in Great Britain are saying, the real money is in India. Let the Americans go. It's just a bunch of forests. Well, as the colonists are wondering what to do, they got about 100 men who've been alerted, not by Paul Revere, but by others who managed to get the word out to Concord in time, that the regulars are out. They're coming to Concord. And about 100 men wait at the town line. They're from Concord and Lincoln, the neighboring town. And they're met by 700 British troops who fan out in the wide open fields. The colonists wisely do a right about face and march right ahead of the British, right over the bridge. Eventually they'll go to a hill over here, which you can't see because of all these darn trees that have grown up on the top of the hill over there. It's called Buttrick's Hill. There's one very important thing you got to remember. Nature plays a big part in the battle. See all these lovely trees here? They weren't here. Remember all the Hollywood movies? Aim small, miss small, hide behind rocks and trees, snipe at those British who wear red, fluorescent red, who don't know how to fight like us Americans do? Oh my, you have a lot to learn. The British were just as good at marksmanship as the Americans. Both sides used the same kind of gun. Smoothbore, flintlock muskets. With an effective aimed range of about, say, the length of the bridge, you can certainly shoot a lot further than that, but you can't be really sure of your aim when you're shooting a smoothbore with a round ball down the barrel. Really past that, because you can't really judge what your target's going to be. These kind of guns are good for shooting it by packed masses of men and other packed masses of men. They work very, very well when you do that. The British win a lot of wars before and after that using those kinds of guns. The colonists are trained the same way the British soldiers are. Remember, they've been training 5 or 6 times a year in the militia, but they've also set up special companies that have to be ready at a moment's notice. And they've elected all new officers to run these companies to make sure they get rid of anyone who's loyal or a so-called Tory in nature. It is a political revolution as well as a war. You want to make sure the people who are fighting the war are on your own side. Makes sense. So The militias and the minute companies from Concord and Lincoln are joined eventually up on that hill in a prearranged rendezvous up on that hill by men from Acton, from Bedford, from another town as well. And they decide eventually, when they start seeing smoke rising from the center of town, they think they're burning down our town. Now the British really aren't burning down the town, but to someone up there in a world without cell phones or radios, they see fires and smoke pouring from the center of town. What's a logical conclusion? They're burning down our own town. Our government's army is burning down our own town. Let's put this in today's, without getting into modern politics, please. I'm a federal employee, I can't go there. But I do want you to think of how serious this was. Imagine, if you will, a group which has been, oh, the sun is out. A group which has been specifically forbidden by the government from appearing, from training. They're using paramilitary tactics. They're an underground organization. They're using a standard military style assault weapon of the day, and they want to overthrow the government using violence and force. Suddenly everyone got very quiet. It's essentially the same things happening back then. And there are a lot of folks who are like, well, I don't agree with my government, but I don't think committing murder and treason is the way to solve it. Others are like, if we don't stop this now, what else is going to come down this highway to us? How many more rights are we going to lose? Are we going to lose our lives too? That's how bad it's gotten. It's taken 10 years from colonists to go from being loyal Englishmen to now people who are willing to not only fight, but die for the cause of what they see as liberty. Especially when they see their own town set on fire. British troops are now down at the bridge. And at the bridge, you've got about 90 British soldiers detached from that main body of soldiers. And they're here guarding this approach to keep the colonists from coming back, and other British soldiers so they can get back from Colonel Barrett's farm. Colonel Barrett lives about 1.5 miles away from here. His house still exists, and at his place are an awful lot of military supplies. Supposedly, the British think they're there. They get out there, they don't find anything. But before they can get back, the 400 men, not 100 men, but now 400 men from those towns, the militiamen and minute companies, are up on the hill. They march down towards the bridge. They march down towards the bridge. Who heads them? Well, we think a man named Isaac Davis from Acton. He was asked, are you afraid to go? No, I'm not afraid to go. I'm not afraid to defend a town on my own. And I haven't got a man that's afraid to go. He will pay for that enterprise and his willingness to sacrifice. He will sacrifice his own life in so doing. He said to his wife a few hours before, take good care of the children. Next time his wife sees him, he's a corpse. Leaves behind a widow, many children. The parade of men, that's the term they would have used back then, the advance of the colonists comes down towards the bridge. Now the bridge is surrounded on both sides by a lot of water back then because it was springtime, no leaves. And on both sides, the bridge is, the road down the bridge is surrounded by water. Coming up towards the bridge, the British start firing warning shots. Bang, bang, bang. Colonists keep on going. They keep on going, and at some point, more British soldiers start firing in earnest, thinking maybe they were given the order, but no one is admitted to giving the order. No one is admitted to giving the order at Lexington either, but now at the North Bridge, here come 400 very angry colonists, but they're marching down in perfect military order. It's not something out of a Frankenstein movie with people with torches and pitchforks. No, they're carrying military equipment. They're dressed like farmers, but the British are really surprised. These guys look like they know what they're doing. They're marching in a seeming regular manner with as much order as the best disciplined troops, and they're coming down towards a bridge. And then suddenly Isaac Davis gets hit. Bang, dead before he hits the ground. Abner Hosmer from Acton is hit. He goes down. More men are hit. And at that point, Major John Buttrick, on whose land this takes place, who's been given the order to march down upon the bridge. Do not fire unless first fired upon. Make sure your men's guns are loaded. He gives the orders which will change the world forever. Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sakes, fire! Who's he telling to do this? Nameless, faceless recruits? No, it's his sons, it's his family, it's his neighbors, it's his friends, people who've been here for 6 generations. He's putting them in harm's way. They're committing murder and treason by shooting at and killing their own government soldiers. But they think we're the true Englishmen here. We're the ones who are fighting for our charter rights as Englishmen that have been taken away from us by a parliament we didn't vote for. The British Army are merely following those orders. so doing, they will kill 2 British, wound several more. And eventually the British will be kicked out of Concord. They will march back to Boston. And all along the way, in the wide open fields, they will be hunted down by the colonists, fired at mostly from long range. By the end of the day, out of 1,700 British troops, they lose 73 dead and about 200 wounded, missing, taken prisoner. The colonists will lose about 45 dead and 50 wounded. It's the beginning of the biggest thing that has ever happened in the past 500 years. This is the place where republics are born. The idea is still spreading to this day. The American Revolution will be over after 8 long unforeseen years, and at the end of it, George III, America's last king, signs the peace treaty saying, "We, George III, do hereby acknowledge the sovereignty and right of America to be its own nation." All because of a bunch of malcontent farmers in Concord, Lexington, and on the Battle Road. That's how it starts. General George Washington comes along, eventually the Battle of Bunker Hill, and so on and so forth. 8 years later, America's found its own nation. Now, this is where we get up and get out of the sun. Now that the sun is out, we're going to go look at how we celebrate this. Because you remember, every generation is going to hear different versions of this. If you're from Lexington in 1775, they said, "Oh, we were all victims. We didn't get a chance to get off a shot. They shot us in the back. They bayoneted us." By 1825, it's a different story. "Oh yeah, I gave them the guts of my gun. Oh yeah, I blew my gun up, killing, yada yada." The story will change. Let's come check out Rangers a while back, and he says, "How do you know that what you're telling us is really true?" Wisdom from the mouths of babes is all I can say. A lot of it is we go by what the words of people actually said back then, the writings which are still left. We also go by the monuments. Now, the monument here is the first permanent one put up in the 1830s. There's still a lot of ill feeling towards Great Britain, especially after the War of 1812, I guess you'd call it the end of the American Revolution. Here on the 19th of April, 1775, was made the first forcible resistance to British aggression. On the opposite bank stood the American militia. Here stood the invading army. Excuse me? Whose land was this back then? It was George III's. The British Army is just trying to put down a rebellion. Remember, the victors get to tell the stories. They are in charge of the narrative.
They write the history.
Yep, they write the history. Well, first, the enemy fell in the War of that Revolution, which gave independence to the United States and gratitude to God. And Love of Freedom is monument erected AD 1836. Why did they wait so long to put up a monument? Well, here's why. America was thinking forward all the time. Go, 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 go west, young man, as Horace Greeley will later say. America is too busy thinking of the present, thinking of the future, to really worry about the past. But really by this time, you had people coming down here all the time. There was no more North Bridge for about 80 years. But people were still coming here to the site where the battle happened, where the first time people actually opened fire. At the dedication of this monument, there was a youth choir which sang a song called the Concord Hymn. One of the verses in it is, "Here their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot around the world." Not meant to denigrate Lexington. It's meant to show that this is the place where people actually follow the orders of their own commanders to shoot back at their own government's army. That's why this place is so important. This is trying to show that, but it's kind of a little biased. But by the 1870s, a bunch of things have happened. Let's cross the river, shall we? Okay, I'm going to ask the young people some questions here. Young man, what language do we speak here in America for the most part? Okay. Why? Why do we speak English? Yes.
Because we used to be British colonists, so we picked up the language.
Okay, all right. Not just language, anything else we picked up from the British? Anybody ever been in the U.S. Army? A A lot of it's modeled on the old British Army. You'd be surprised how much we still do from the British Army. Our laws come from Great Britain. British laws also come from Roman law. So there's so much in common that we have with the British. I think that a lot of things are going to be very, very important by the 20th century. And one man who's not even British or even American kind of says, here's what the future is going to be like. He says the most important fact of the future is going to be that the man is Otto von Bismarck. He is the Chancellor of Germany, first Prussia, then Germany in the late 1800s. He says the most important thing of the future will be that Great Britain and America, these two empires, speak the same language. By 1925, something very important has happened about 10 years before that. What am I talking
Oh, World War I.
about? World War I, where we entered on the side of not the Germans. The main thing is we actually entered it on the side of whom?
British.
The British and the French,
Yep.
and the
Oui.
Italians and the Portuguese and everybody else. But in 1925, Alan French, a local historian, had a big sign down here, which was later made into a plaque on a boulder. Part of it talks about what happened here, but at the bottom it says, and here began the separation of two kindred nations, now happily long united in peace. Turn around, grave of British soldiers. They came 3,000 miles and died to keep the past upon us. Unheard beyond their ocean tide, their English mother made her moan. Lamenting the past, lamenting a world which is no longer here. Why would we memorialize British soldiers? Can you imagine going to Iwo Jima and memorializing the dead Japanese that were there? How about going to a D-Day cemetery and memorializing the SS soldiers buried there? Because we are British in our culture, we are British in our nature, British in our language, religion, laws, and so many of our customs. We saw that we were better off together than apart. Therefore, we have the grave of British soldiers over there. There are 2 British soldiers buried over there from the 4th King's Own Regiment. And every Patriots Day, the British Army will send in representatives. They receive no battle honors for being here, but still they want to be remembered. And we try and give an even-handed representation in our stories so that people come away with a better understanding. We don't just tell one narrative. We make sure in the Park Service we tell all the stories of enslaved people, the story of women, the story of the natives around here, and of course the story of the British. And I think it's really important to notice that in 1950, it was a huge celebration here, the 175th anniversary of the battle. And over there was a huge speaker's dais right by the British soldiers' grave. It's right in the middle of the Cold War. Anybody know what the Cold War was?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where we're trying to keep the forces of communism from taking over the world, the free world versus the communist world, the forces of light versus the forces of darkness, the forces of good versus the forces of evil. And who's standing over there at the speaker's dais? Why? Retired general of the army himself, 5-star General Omar Bradley, the hero of D-Day, gets up and tells everyone, we are in a new world, a place where we must fight. We must all band together to fight against the forces who would enslave us. Who's he standing arm in arm with up there? He's got his arms around British Army generals, Royal Navy admirals, wing commodores, the Royal Air Force, and he's saying we're all in this together. And a few days later, what happens? The Korean War begins. You got any Korean War relatives in your family? Ask them about that. I'll finish up with one last celebration. 1975, the bicentennial. The bicentennial down here was 2 Americas. Traditional America was on one side of the river. It would have been, brass bands playing, the Concord Minutemen, drum majorettes twirling, and all kinds of neat things happening. On the other side, you've got self-described left-wing dope-smoking hippies. That's what they called themselves. They were part of the People's Bicentennial Commission. They're arguing for a fairer, more just world. And they're waving, believe it or not, the yellow "Don't Tread on Me" flag. That's their symbol. President Gerald Ford comes here, delivers a speech. He's gotten out of here real quick by the Secret Service. And I think it's interesting to note that the two Americas will eventually come together. The age of Aquarius comes together with traditional America on this side, and they'll create a whole new world which we know today. So folks, remember, every generation comes here and sees this anew. You've seen all the various monuments. I told you the story based upon the testimony of people that actually fought here, the records they left behind. But each generation sees this anew, celebrates in a different way. These old bottles they pour new wine into, and they come here and look at it differently from their own points of view. This republic, well, as Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, if you can keep it, in a better part of 250 years, we're still here, and we get folks from all over the world who come here. So remember, as you go throughout the park, remember this place is special to us Americans. That's Gettysburg, Antietam, Andersonville, Yorktown, Trenton, Stonewall Inn, Martin Luther King's birthplace, the USS Arizona. These places are all managed for the American people by the National Park Service. I'm proud to say I'm part of this organization, and as you go throughout this park, remember, like the old bumper sticker says, it's still true. All gave some gave all for the cause of freedom. So please, go through this park, remember, you're standing on ground consecrated in the blood of patriots, as well as people who were ordered to do what they thought was the right thing, the right justice. Please remember that as you go throughout this park. This is a very special place, people from all over the world. I'll leave you with that thought and enjoy this beautiful day. Thank you.
So next.
Glory, glory.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Penny. Happy birthday to you.